I gotta get some different intro music for these more serious discussions. Okay, that's enough of Hardwell. I keep having to re-record this because I go over, because there's all these kind of all these kind of moments of silence, because it's really hard to wrap my head around a lot of these things. And I'm talking about Milo, and I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this, so I'm kind of, towards the ass end of the discussion and throwing my 2 cents in. And for those of you who aren't familiar, Milo is a conservative entertainer. He says a lot of kind of outlandish things. He was on Bill Maher recently, and I think he insulted like everybody on Bill Maher, saying, Bill, you got to get like a higher IQ panel. And a lot of us were like thinking the same thing. But because he says it in this kind of like flamboyant, dickish way, it's entertainment, right? And he is primarily like kind of a conservative entertainer. Brings a smile to the conservative face by, conservative faces by talking about the hypocrisy of the SJWs and stuff like that. And as a liberal, and I agree with his stance on SJWs, I don't think they're liberals. I have said that they're non-liberals or even anti-liberals. So there are some things he says that I find, very entertaining. But about a year ago, a little more, he was on 2 shows, The Drunken Peasants and Joe Rogan, and he made some statements about intergenerational relationships. And that's pretty much where everyone lost their mind. And justifiably so. Milo is a victim of child sexual abuse. And I look at this from that angle because I know what that does. I've been involved in the gay community for a while. I think I was in my early 20s when I was the gay club at my college, the Gay and Lesbian Union at my first college. They became a political ally of mine. I was very liberal, and I never really saw anything wrong with it. I don't come from a religion that I'm Unitarian, so we've been marrying gays since like God knows when. I know we were the first. I'm not sure what the year was. Same-sex marriage, if any kind of same-sex marriage thing, there's usually a Unitarian minister within the stone's throw. And my grandfather was a Unitarian minister. Me and my immediate family didn't go to church. We weren't atheists necessarily. Unitarianism is about as close as you can get to atheism without being atheist. And there are Unitarian atheists. There's actually a huge, amount of groups within Unitarianism. And I think it makes it if you included all those groups, it would be the 3rd largest religion in the world. It has more than Judaism. In fact, a lot of formerly Jewish people, as far as their religion, later on in life convert to Unitarianism. I'm not sure why I'm going into that. I'm uncomfortable, to be honest, talking about this subject. Nobody wants to be seen that they're like backing up molestation, right? So you kind of have to be careful what you say, and you have to qualify, and you get to go. You tend to go off on tangents because you don't want to say anything stupid. So Milo made these statements about like these intergenerational gay relationships, where you have adult men, usually, we're not talking 18, just turned 18. We have these men who are decades older than the boys that they're molesting. And Milo has been very clear about his activism against pedophilia, but there's some mental gymnastics in his head that pedophilia is adult men and prepubescent boys. That's one of the statements he made, I believe, on Rogan. And even though he's been like an anti-pedophilia activist, which it's kind of weird that there are people that have to be anti-pedophilia activists now. It's kind of like what I said last show. What, rape is wrong? Am I allowed to think that? Yeah, I think across the board, most normal people think pedophilia is wrong, but we also have an age of consent that's at least 16. And you see that codified in our laws. Like in Britain, the age of consent is 16. In the United States, it depends on the state. It can be 17 or 18. If you have a boyfriend, let's say, and you're a young girl, and you two were dating at 15 and 14, you could, there's like a Romeo and Juliet clause in a lot of states. I know Texas has it because of the Transformers movie. There's like a Romeo and Juliet law where if you had a relationship younger and, the boy turns 18 and she's still 17, then it's not, it's kind of continuation of a youthful relationship. And we have these kind of gray areas that we're always kind of trying to figure out. When you're older and you have like children in your family, either your children or nieces and nephews, it really changes your views as far as kind of being flippant about it to being kind of hardcore, because you imagine something happening to a child in your family and you really you want to set people on fire. That's a normal reaction. You want to hang people, you want to bury them under the jail, And I don't think that's just like, people being angry. That's, the justifiable reaction. That you have that kind of emotional set when you're talking about children that could have been yours or children that could have been in your family. And I think a lot of us get there way before there's any kind of, we have children, or it depends, if you have children at 18, obviously it's a little different. But, I think as we're going through our 20s, we don't really think about these things because we got so many people to choose from that are of adult age. And unless you've been a victim yourself, these justifications don't even come into your head. You're just happy as a pig in what, that, there's all these, that you're young and beautiful and everybody you can have sex with is pretty young and beautiful. And there's just so much out there. And it's not hard these days. But the whole free love thing, in the 60s, that made it kind of easy to get laid these days, did not include molestation of younger people. People below the age of consent. And I've heard this from victims before. I've heard this from people like Milo before. And, your first reaction is, first you get kind of uncomfortable, and then you get kind of angry. What the fuck is this person saying? No, that's wrong. And you don't like the justifications. You get angry at the justifications. Like I've said, I've heard this more than once. And sometimes the justification will be, oh, they're 18 now, and the person's like 40. And while there's nothing technically wrong with that, and while that could be kind of what Milo's talking about, it's still pretty freaking suspect because there's a power differential. Now, what do I mean by that? Just being kind of an adult with an adult life, having your own kind of, having your own things, your own ownership of cars and apartments and all that, puts you in a very powerful position when it comes to a teenager who, just recently stopped playing with G.I. Joes or dolls. It's rough to talk about. Like I said, I don't want to in any way justify these intergenerational relationships, or even like a 20-year-old with a 13-year-old, or an 18-year-old with a 13-year-old. That's fucking crazy. But like I said, I've heard this before, and I've heard this mantra of justification, and it always comes from somebody who has been abused, somebody who's been taken advantage of. And when you're 13, Milo said, this, I believe it's the Father Michael relationship, happened from 13 to 16. So you have this Catholic priest who's in a position of power. As a 13-year-old, you don't understand how people rope you in. You don't understand how people put you in situations. So much can seem to be just spontaneously happening. We don't understand how people trick us. We don't understand how people gaslight us. As a society, we're pretty dumb as fuck, and we don't understand, as adults, a lot of these things. When you're 13, you don't even have that kind of left ear ringing that something's wrong. You just have hormones all over the place, and you're wondering when your voice will, sound more like an adult, because you get that kind of squeaky thing going on, where it's like deep and high pitched, and you go back and forth, and sometimes because of your growth, you're awkward. You can kind of, you're walking like you have some spinal disorder or something. You're just kind of coming into young adulthood, and relationships between young adults. I think even that we push against, because we know that while it may be innocent, either if they're both 13, neither of them are really in their head yet, in adult mode yet. And that's a normal way to think about it, because that's kind of the reality. When somebody's molested, they are almost necessarily gaslit, either by the person who's molesting them, or maybe a prior molester, or somebody who was trying, kind of laid the groundwork. I understand what Milo's getting at, and that the relationship he had made him feel better about being gay. But at the same time, this pedophile, and I don't have the same definition, and I think Milo's definition will be changing soon. This pedophile, these men who go for younger boys, they take advantage of that. They see that their gaydar goes off, and they see, they're going to be, once they hit the age of consent, quite the catch. I don't know what to say about this whole kind of trail of tears, this trail of molestation that happens, because it's usually people who are abused in some way, most often sexually, that engage in these crimes, and they're crimes, and I think we all see them as such, although our age of consent may differ. That is a bit cultural, but I see it as kind of people justifying what happened to them versus the people it didn't happen to going, no, that's not true. That's a hard thing to explain, but there's always kind of this undercurrent. Men who want young girls, or always kind of push the envelope of what's acceptable. Then you're a father with a daughter, or an uncle with nieces, and you push back. And there's always this kind of, almost there's this line, and we're just always kind of pushing back and forth on that line. And the people who want to take advantage of younger people are always trying to push that to a younger age, while the rest of us think of it as a horror show. We understand that there's an inherent power differential, especially if someone's like a religious figure, somebody in any sort of position of power, where they can kind of set up the younger person, put these things in their head and gaslight them. I'm not far enough left to justify anybody acting on impulses they may have, even if it comes from them being molested, even if it comes from them being gaslit. But I don't think Milo's ever acted on it, and I think that there is actually kind of a strong anti-pedophilia kind of activist within him. He's called people out. He's done the right thing on a few occasions, and pushed against kind of a narrative that would justify the prepubescent pedophilia. I don't know how old the people who were involved, the people he attacked for pedophilia were, but I know that it was actually Jeff Holliday's video. He put up Milo's statement, which I would do for you here, but it's just a podcast right now. I haven't gone video too much yet, although I've started putting my podcast up on YouTube. And I will be going video, so you can see my ugly mug. Now, to be clear, no one's supporting pedophilia, and I don't think Milo is either. He made a lot of justifications with, I think he said, I think in the gay community especially, some younger people are more mature. He made the justifications that somebody makes when they're gaslighting you in order to molest you. And while we can all sit here and disagree, of course, rather vehemently actually, with that mentality, I think Milo's going to be singing a different tune pretty soon. Because he had internalized those justifications from his abusers. And that's what it seems like it is to me. And I know I'm a bit more liberal than my more conservative friends as far as these areas. I find Milo quite entertaining. And that's what he does. He's an entertainer. But when you're an entertainer, and we see this with comedians who have like really serious depression problems and stuff like that, which is kind of common with comedians. We see this in a lot of entertainers where their kind of internal baggage comes out. When you're gaslit, it twists your reality. and purposely so that people can take advantage of you. That's why they do it. And it's not surprising, and I've seen this before, where the victims espouse the mentality that they were brainwashed into. And think of it not just as gaslighting, but brainwashing. I don't really take the whole, my family didn't support me thing too seriously, because that's kind of a side issue. I know that as being an advocate for my gay friends for quite a long time now. I know that these kind of undercurrents are in the gay community. That doesn't make them right, though. And I think most homosexuals would agree with that. But I think there's a bit of a process involved. A lot of these mentalities haven't seen the light of day because of, the entire community being closeted. And I think the community has been taken advantage of by these sexual predators to the point where there's an undercurrent of justification for it. And it takes a while for somebody to kind of see the damage done to them. And this is what happens with any kind of trauma. Often there's a justification by the perpetrator that gets internalized, and then you have to deal with their own kind of journey. They have to deal with their own kind of journey back to normalcy. So when I hear these statements, to me it's like a huge, giant neon sign saying I was molested, I was abused. And the thing is, there's a difference between a person who kind of has these internalized views and doesn't act on them because they know it's wrong, no matter what they say. I think Milo's in that boat. And then there's people who act on it. And whatever they went through, as far as, their reality being destroyed and ripped apart, being taken advantage of by predators, etc., whatever they went through, there's never a justification. So, yeah, that was another uncomfortable pause, right? There's never a justification for abusing somebody. Especially intergenerational abuse. There is an inherent power differential. Even if the 13-year-old or 14-year-old doesn't see that, and they don't act that way, it's more than a bit creepy. It's criminal, and it should be. We don't even we have lines or kind of gray areas when it comes to like the Romeo and Juliet rules, when it comes to what if both the victim and the perpetrator were very young. There are some gray areas, but there is no gray area with a 29-year-old and a 13-year-old. It is the responsibility of that adult, no matter how forward and hit on you are, to not allow that relationship to happen. There is no justification. You could see kind of, what they went through and see it as disease and stuff like that, but there has to be, for them to be a human being, a decent human being, even at the lowest levels of decency, to know that they can't take advantage like that. That's just not allowed. And I think that we are even suspicious of any intergenerational kind of relationship that deals with somebody who may be kind of not in their adult mind yet, like a 35-year-old and an 18-year-old or something like that. It's become a little bit more acceptable with an older man and a younger girl, but even then it's and I would say if you're that older man, you probably don't want that younger girl. Just trust me. If you're that younger girl, you don't want a guy that much older than you. No matter what your daddy complex might be. People are messed up. And they may say some crazy things. But there's a reason in the law, if they act on those crazy things, we lock them up. There's no evidence that Milo ever acted on any of these things, on these so-called views. He kind of backpedaled and justified and regurgitated the gaslighting techniques, like, oh, you're mature, you're not like other 13-year-olds. Can't you just see a molester saying that? Or, you're so alone, being a gay boy. I want to give you some affection. You're not getting it at home. I think Stefan Molyneux's video made a big point of that there is I'm sorry, something popped up on my phone. YouTube, for some reason, pops up a bunch of ads now, or maybe it's Spreaker. I haven't set up yet on my laptop, so every once in a while I'm going to lose my train of thought, especially when it's Plenty of Fish and like a half-naked chick pops up. I'm sorry, Milo. Well, I'm not sorry. Fuck you. But I think you're going to be changing your tune pretty soon, because I think inherently he's a good person who was brainwashed and gaslit, and he tries to justify these kind of intergenerational relationships because that's what he went through. And, that facing the trauma of that, well, that's a difficult thing. And when I say that, I mean really difficult, not, finding a nice pair of pants, difficult, but getting through a traumatic event. I would definitely suggest people look into PTSD and complex PTSD. This was an ongoing molestation from 13 to 16. Like I said, there was this huge power differential. An older man that was also a priest. It's scary and disheartening that these things happen. And it's scarier and even more disheartening that people who go through this sometimes go and act on this. They justify all this stuff in their head. I remember there was a professor at my last college before I got my BA in psychology. I think it was a sociology professor who talked about this intergenerational stuff and how it could be good, and mentoring, and helping young gay boys. And it's really, to me, it's just taking advantage. It's just being a predator. Because why aren't you having a relationship with a gay man your own age, or same sex? If you're a lesbian, having a lesbian relationship with someone close to your age, because you're a predator, and that's not a justifiable thing. It's a crime for a reason. I don't know. Maybe he'll come out and be very into, maybe he'll double down and say, no, I really, really do agree with these relationships. But I don't see that, because even in these interviews a year ago on Rogan and the Drunken Peasants, he was like, well, I was very mature, but you can't assume that. Sometimes it's a good thing, but he wasn't saying it always is. You could see he's already kind of on that journey to face the trauma. And when he does that, I feel for him, because that's going to be some very painful shit. To realize you've been kind of backing up the worldview that this predator used to take advantage of you. Your world kind of shatters. You have to kind of pick up the pieces of it. And you have to somehow return to normalcy. And I guess I differ from some of my conservative friends in that I see some of these orientation as, I don't see it as a sickness. I don't see it as a disease. I don't see it, in any way like that. I guess maybe my Unitarian upbringing, that wasn't really an issue. There were more, it was more of a curiosity, like, really? You do that? I remember the first time, like, my gay friend kissed his boyfriend in front of me. And, I had kind of, they would peck each other on the cheek around me. It took me a while to get used to that, but like the first, like, passionate kiss, I think it was their anniversary. And they had never done that in front of me before, and it was, it kind of creeped me out. I got used to it later on, though, but it's, there is still, there's an undercurrent of, us cisgender, I guess, people. It does kind of creep us out a little bit. But I got to tell you, if you're a conservative and you still react that way, allow yourself to have some gay friends, and I think you'll get over it pretty quick. In fact, I know I kind of went from being a little bit homophobic, kind of grew up in a little bit of a homophobic kind of white trash culture, and I went from that, not my family in particular, they were always very liberal, but just kind of the surroundings. It was definitely implied, and once I got used to seeing them as just human beings, and once I got out of the mentality of seeing it as kind of seeing it as, just kind of like a party culture, and they're all kind of like, slutty and all that stuff. When I started seeing like stable relationships, which is the majority of same-sex relationships are actually very stable. In fact, I often joke that the only decent marriages we have in this country are the same-sex relationships, or at least a percentage of them. I've actually seen more decent stable relationships between same-sex couples than I have with cisgender couples. But we all have this mentality of, them kind of being slutty and stuff. But, when you come from the outside of it, you kind of, when you don't know what a bear and a pocket bear is, and like all their kind of jargon. You get this view that's kind of determined by other people and their views. And when you're cisgendered, it is kind of a little off-putting when you're not used to it. But like I said, it's like, get some gay friends, you know? And I'm kind of proud of this generation and a few previous, not so much mine, with Gen X, but definitely the millennials and the Zs. Even though they're conservative, there's a lot of things that they just don't see as an issue. And I think that's the best way to kind of the best way to have a view on this is just to not really have a view on it. Like, I don't care. I mean, I know my generation, when we kind of mixed with the millennials a little bit, because I was kind of like an older college student. We played gay chicken a lot, where we kind of, make gay jokes as far as like acting gay. And we got some kind of grief sometimes from people who were very homophobic. And we just laughed it off, just, having fun. And this was in a fraternity. In a very cisgendered fraternity. I'm happy to see that opinions are changing as far as normalizing just same-sex relationships. And I hope that normalization kind of brings out this dark side and some of the gaslighting that these pedophile predators have done to these people like Milo. And I hope that he gets to a point where he sees it as qualified as it is, his kind of intergenerational views and mentoring, as what it did to him. And he has to understand that. And I think he will. I think we'll hear a little bit of a tune changing. And I think he'll continue his kind of anti-pedophilia activism and calling people out, probably more vehemently. But once he hits that point where he's kind of taking apart this world that was created in order to justify his molestation, when he starts going into that, it's going to be a very, very rough trip. And I hope he has enough money for some good therapists, because it's not easy going from gaslighting into reality again. I don't accept the justification that, he was ostracized by his family and therefore this made him feel. No. Predators see that and they take advantage of it. It's as simple as that. And the mental gymnastics he's been doing to kind of, back up what it was done to him, this kind of Munchausen syndrome. When you're in the public light like this and your baggage slips out, it becomes harder and harder in the light of day to justify and to kind of stick with that mentality that they did to you. Now, he says he got molested at 13 by this one guy. We don't know if it was something earlier. We don't know if there was something in the family. That's something people don't really talk about until they really go through it. I really hope him the best. I don't see him as justifying pedophilia. I see him as making statements based on the gaslighting that he went through. and that he's probably noticing as we speak was a gaslighting, was being taken advantage of. I don't think he's going to double down on this. Even when he made his written statement, it was kind of, you saw the kind of reading, if you read between the lines, it was kind of getting further and further away from the justifications. And I really hope him the best. I feel for him. I don't think I'd feel for him if I found out that he actually, because he had this worldview, he went in and did some stuff with younger boys. Then that kind of, that compassion's out the window and replaced by a flamethrower. I shouldn't say that. That's horrible. But, we all have that kind of feeling. We think of our children or, the children in our family, like nieces and nephews, and it's kind of normal to get very upset to think of someone taking advantage of them that way. I hope him the best. I hope he, like I said, he has money for some therapy, some good therapists. And this is uncomfortable for me, and I think it's uncomfortable to talk about. And those are often the things most important to talk about. The kind of long-lasting effects of these traumas. Like I mentioned before, look up like PTSD and complex PTSD. The methods that these people use, these predators use, it's something I think maybe this conversation will give us an impetus to get educated about, so that we don't just have this from the hip wanting to shank some guy in the neck who's talking to our niece, that will see the methods and be able to counter them, be able to talk to the person who could be the victim and help them protect themselves, not just from that predator, but any other predator. I mean, this is a conversation we need to have with the young people in our lives, whether you're a parent or you're just in their lives and you know it and the parents aren't having the conversation. Well, this is part of the better education I'm talking about, as far as we need to look at what these people do, how they do it, and prepare our younger people to counter it, to not get gaslit. They don't realize when you're 13, you don't know how somebody's manipulating you. I mean, just the phrase gaslighting hasn't really come into vogue until the last few years. It seems like as a species we're, just very backwards, and it's just we're just kind of waking up. And I think in this generation especially, we need to educate younger people about what other people can do. People in power can use that power. And I hope that the things that Milo said don't just, ruin his political career or something, but they actually help us have that conversation. Getting up on that 45 minutes. So, much love. Good night and good luck.